Going live. It says it's going live. Waiting. Oh, it says that I am live. Good morning, kids. It's Dad here. There we go. Making sure that my video is up and running. All my audio is up and running. Hey, good morning. What a great day to talk about games. A great day to talk about first-person shooters, and there's kind of a lot to talk about today. Number one. I have a cold. I have a pretty nasty cold, so I'm probably going to sound a little off. And if my audio cuts out, that's probably because I muted the mic so I could make some gross noises without grossing you out while doing that. Number two, I do want to point out that, yes, I am being a little petty here and talking about this video and wanting to go point by point. But it's not, I don't have anything against the Act Man personally. I've never watched any of his other content. I genuinely had never heard of the guy until I saw this thumbnail going around and that this video was going to be something that was coming out. I've never heard of the guy. I've got nothing against the guy. I saw that there is this take on first-person shooters, and it looked off immediately, and so I watched the video once already, and it is not great. It's not great. And I say that as someone who wants to see gaming history accurately represented. I think it's so important for the preservation and representation of gaming history to be presented accurately. And so ultimately the reason I decided to go ahead and do this live video talking about it was because there's a lot of misinformation and there's a lot of just like getting things wrong in this video. And so when I see someone, a YouTuber, who has 171 million subscribers, this video alone has gotten over 300,000 views already. And when I first watched it, it had only been out for an hour, and in that hour, it had gotten 73,000 views. Like, we're not just talking about someone like me who's just kind of coming up, who, I'm hoping to hit that 1,000 subscriber mark soon. I'm not like, I'm someone who is just like this small-time dude, and I don't have a lot of reach, so if I make a few mistakes at this point, I have room to correct myself. But when you've got someone like the Act Man, for example, who has a very, very large reach, for him to put out a video that has a lot of just like, I'll be blunt, horrible misinformation and what feels like a lack of research, and presents it as this is a historical, this is your history lesson for the day or whatever. I'm talking about something in the games, in the gaming community, and I'm giving it to you to watch, to learn something. Then you have to be way more careful with how you present the information and the accuracy, and how you're showing this history to, your viewers. And I'm sure a lot of his viewers are probably younger and haven't been through that history of gaming and lived through it. And you know what? It also presents the opportunity to really talk about how do we define shooters these days? Like, how do we define specific types of first-person shooters? There's a lot of debate, even in the community. Like, a lot of people don't like the term boomer shooter, for example. More people prefer the term retro shooter versus boomer shooter. What is a movement shooter? What is an arena shooter? So I don't want to get too out of pocket. I don't want to get too off track. Today we're just talking about what is an arena shooter, and does this video accurately talk about arena shooters and the history of first-person shooters, and is this video something that is being put out there in a correct manner? And I think it's important for, like I said, I'm a small-time YouTuber, but I think it's very important for any YouTuber who has a platform, who has any kind of reach, to put that information out there as accurately as possible, Linko, holy shit, dude, nice to see you. I'm gonna butcher this. Poila Pan, greetings from Singapore. Holy shit, thank you so much for being here. I'm really excited. I apologize that my voice sounds like this because I'm under the weather, but it's good to have people here. Thank you so much. I've done my lengthy intro, which everyone always yells at me for. No more intro. We're just gonna get to the bottom of it. Now, you can see up here I've got all my tabs. I did about 20 minutes of prep for this. And not to be snarky already, but it feels like that 20 minutes of prep was more prep time than the Act Man put into his video. So before we jump into this, I really want to define what is an arena shooter. Because we've got the topic here is the rise and fall of arena shooters. So what is an arena shooter? Classically speaking, using the Wikipedia article here, you can see arena shooter. An arena shooter is a subgenre of shooter games and multiplayer games that cover both the first-person and third-person shooter genres. These games emphasize fast-paced movement in an enclosed map, in enclosed map designs that foster engagement between players. And if we go down here to history, we can see how, Wolfenstein, Doom, Quake, these games all kind of set the tone for what would become arena shooters. Hey, greetings from Poland. Oh God, I'm a quarter Polish on my mom's side, and I would try saying your name, but I know I'm gonna butcher it. I try to have a good grasp of Polish pronunciations, but I would butcher your name, so I apologize. But greetings from Poland. Thank you so much. Thank you for being here. It's wonderful to have you here. So the history here, we could see the rise of games that had first-person shooters that had deathmatch components, but the first real arena shooters were Unreal Tournament, Turok Rage Wars, and Quake 3 Arena. These games, in contrast to previous entries in their respective series, were focused on multiplayer matches, and the single-player component focused on playing the same multiplayer maps with computer-controlled bots. And that's really the heart of what is an arena shooter. Because you've got first-person shooters, you can call them boomer shooters, you can call them retro shooters, you can call them whatever, but they were primarily single-player experiences that had deathmatch components as an additional aspect of the game, starting with Doom. So arena shooters, by definition, are the online-only multiplayer shooters, first-person shooters, with an emphasis on movement, on creative weapons, and on level design. Now, in the description for this video, I linked a video here by Mako, the Magnificent Rabbit. This video is called What is an Arena FPS, which is a love letter to a great genre of games. Now, I highly recommend you go and watch this. I don't want to take up too much of everyone's time because I want to focus on the Act Man's video. But we could see here in the chapter descriptions, he lists 3 criterion for what is an arena shooter. And this is an excellent video, and I really do love his analysis of arena shooters, and at the end talking about the gray areas between arena shooters, because I do agree we don't necessarily need very strict criterion. There should be kind of an allowance for gray areas. But his criterion for what is an arena shooter: a diverse arsenal, skillful movement, and thrilling arenas. And I really thoroughly agree with setting that up as that's the nice basic criterion. What is an arena shooter, and how do we establish, is this an arena shooter? Aside from the fact that it is multiplayer and online. And this guy he lists some great arena shooters here: Quake Champions, Unreal Tournament, Toxic, Reflex Arena, the Doom, the Quake Champions demake mod, which I need to play at some point. I really need to play that. Go ahead, Pira. I see you wanting to ask your question. Go ahead. Oldest implement weapon wheel. That is an excellent question. I don't actually know the answer to that. Weapon wheels are, as far as I know, they're a relatively recent addition to first-person shooters. That's a great question. I wish I knew that, and I wish I could. I wish I had time to go and look that up here real quick. But I'm trying to stay focused. But I think that's an excellent question. I'm gonna guess sometime in the 2010s. Probably late 2010s, maybe mid 2010s. But anyways, so I listed this video here in the description of this video, as well as Leadhead's video called The Perfect Arena Shooter, which is her talking about her experience with a game called Rats Instagib. And that's a hell of a arena shooter right there. You're just rats, and you're shooting railguns, and it's Instagibs, Instagib every single time. So, without further ado, I've done my prep, I've done my research. Now's the time for us to actually, let me go into theater mode here. Let's actually look at the Actman's video. Let's go point by point, because that's what I want to do, and let's address any misinformation. He does make a couple of good points, so I'm not here to just rag on this guy and just, talk about how shitty and stupid and dumb he is. I do want to point out that there are a good couple of points in here, but there's a lot of misinformation, and there's a lot of bad takes. Real quick, Carrots, I had the best time teenage years playing Quake 3 on the Dreamcast and Unreal Tournament 2003. Greetings from the Netherlands. Psh. Singapore, Poland, and the Netherlands. Amazing. 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 All right. So, without further ado, thank you all for being here and for putting up with my shitty, cold-laden voice. And let's talk about the Actman.
You ever wonder why trends come and go? Why the tide comes in and then goes out? Or how Keanu Reeves seems to be the only man immune to the effects of aging and the passage of time? Scientists are still hard at work answering these questions. But we're not here to talk about the latest fashion craze, though it's clear I'm an expert on that subject. What types of games and fads have stayed popular for the last 10, 20, or even 30 years? How has Pokemon and Mario managed to stay relevant? Why didn't Capcom bring back tank controls for the RE4 remake? If you've ever wondered why some trends in gaming die and others stick around, well, then get ready to rock out with your out, because today we're discussing the most metal of these trends, the rise of what would become gaming's most popular genre.
It's time to kick ass and chew bubble gum, and I'm all out of gum.
I really want to point out immediately that we're seeing images of Duke, Quake, Half-Life. Hey, there's Unreal Tournament. That's an actual arena shooter. Quake 2, not an arena shooter. Quake 3, arena. That's an arena shooter. So, Jesus Christ, I'm sorry not to be that guy, but none of these games listed in his thumbnail are actually arena shooters. And someone else on Twitter already pointed it out that that's not even an official render of Gordon Freeman. It's from some like Unreal Engine 5 render. Yeah, what was with that? What was with the motion blur in Quake 2? What was that? I didn't even, let me go back a second. I need to see that a second here. Let's go back. I'm glad somebody pointed that out, because I registered it in the back of my head while it was playing, but like I didn't. Here we go. Yeah, what the shit? Also, can I point out that we're already off from a timeline perspective, because Quake 2 came out before, Quake 2 came out before Unreal Tournament and Half-Life. So we're already way off here. We're already way off base. And let's see, the Quake controls are the same for Resident Evil 4. Yeah, there were no tank controls in Resident Evil 4, so I don't know where we were going with that. Alright, let's see what we got here.
But with every rise comes a fall.
A king has his reign, and then he dies. It's inevitable.
It's easy to forget the humble beginnings of FPS given how massive the game industry has become, but ever since man created gun, we have enjoyed shooting things, mostly alive things. Wolfenstein 3D is credited as being the first FPS title anybody really cared about, the first Avatar, if you will. But id Software didn't invent the concept. If you think about it, first-person shooters were merely an evolution of arcade and space shooters. Just a change in perspective. And battle royales are merely the evolution of arena shooters, and now extraction BRs are the hot thing. And
I'm sorry. Say that again, buddy. Say that again.
if you think about it, first-person shooters were merely an evolution of arcade and space shooters.
I mean, to an extent, I would say maybe, but they're not really an evolution of arcade space shooters so much as they were just a different way of playing games. So you look at Battlezone from the 80s, you look at oh god, oh no, there goes my cred. I'm already id Software's early work before Wolfenstein. Just putting things in first person doesn't necessarily make it a first person shooter. Putting it in first person, especially back then in the arcade games, that wasn't necessarily an evolution of what we're seeing here of Asteroid. It's just a difference in gameplay, I wouldn't say. So
the change in perspective. And
yes, thank you for saying Catacombs 3D. Catacombs 3D was before Wolfenstein 3D. Thank you. Sometimes you ever try to think of a song, like that you try to think of a song while you're listening to another song, and then you just can't think of that other song because you're listening to this other song, so you just can't do. I'm seeing these games in front of me, and I'm talking about certain games, and then I'm like, I can't think of the other name of the other game because I'm talking about other games. So yes, Catacombs 3D. Thank you, Gads. I appreciate you. Okay, so this quote right here, this is what I wanted to.
Royales are merely the evolution of arena shooters, and now extraction BRs are the hot thing, and so on and so forth.
Okay, so Battle Royales as a evolution of arena shooters. If it wasn't for the fact that he's talking about arena shooters as these old retro boomer shooters, then I would agree wholeheartedly with that statement. Battle Royale is 100% an evolution of the arena shooter genre. But more than that, I would say hero shooters, class shooters, which we'll get into because that's going to be more relevant later in this video. Hero shooters, class shooters like Team Fortress and Valorant and obviously Overwatch. Those are more the direct evolution, whereas Battle Royale is just kind of like, it feels less of an evolution of an arena shooter and more of like a, no, evolution is right. I'm just gonna, I don't think I need to get too technical, but I do agree with that point specifically.
About a week ago, I told a buddy of mine I was working on a video about the rise and fall of arena shooters, and he looked at me and he was like, I don't even know what those are. And I guess that's the point. That's how far out of relevance they've fallen.
That's, wow. Just wow. That, I'm going to say it. I feel like that was a contrived conversation. I don't necessarily, I think, obviously, if you don't know what you're talking about, when you try to explain it to someone and they look at you and they go, I don't know what you're talking about, it could be more because you don't know what you're talking about. Would you say arena shooters? Because arena shooters are kind of an off branch of boomer shooters, first-person shooters. When you just say first-person shooters, I think everybody gets this image in their head of like high throttle, full-fledged action gaming, Doom, Quake, Call of Duty. You're not necessarily thinking about whatever intelligent mechanics or stratagems or esports or whatever are in the background of anything. You just say first-person shooter. The rise of, you could just say first-person shooters. You say an arena shooter to just someone who isn't that knowledgeable around first-person shooters or the history of them, and they'd be like, I don't understand what you're talking about. So, like, considering he clearly doesn't know what he's talking about so far, that just feels like a kind of a contrived, like, hey, I'm talking about arena shooters. Like, you're obviously not going to know that. And now I get to tell people nobody knows what an arena shooter is. Which it's because you don't know either, buddy.
But why?
Why?
Well, let's clarify. What exactly is an arena shooter? Well, typically it's a game characterized by ultra-fast movement. Things like bunny hopping, rocket jumping.
Agreed.
You got an arsenal of weapons to choose from. Iconic things like the double-barreled shotgun or chainsaws, rocket launchers, flamethrowers, space guns, plasma rifles, all that cool shit. These games often had a weapon wheel or allowed players to hold every...
Okay, the weapon wheel part, I don't know. Again, so we had that question earlier in the chat. What's the oldest weapon wheel known in video gaming? I don't know. Weapon wheel is very, very recent as far as, like, fucking first-person shooting is concerned. Wub, how much did you miss? We're only about 2 minutes and 40 seconds into the Ackman's video. How much did you miss of me ranting? Well, I talk a lot, so no, we're not. We're very, very we're very early on here. So, yes, Gads, I missed your question. Catacombs was for the magazine it was in contract with. Yes. You are absolutely correct there. And Wub, don't worry about it. I'm not here to tear the man down. I've got nothing personal against the man. I'm literally only talking about this video and how this video addresses arena shooters, boomer shooters, that sort of thing. I've got nothing against the man. The rest of his content is whatever to me. I'm just talking about what's in this video. Andrew, good to see you. Okay, so yeah, weapon wheels. Saying that arena shooters or even first-person boomer retro shooters primarily rely on a weapon wheel, like you're not even going to see that in an actual arena shooter, because you're not going to stop and pause your weapon wheel while you're online playing in the midst of combat with everyone. Like, I don't know, like, I haven't seen that very much. I don't play Call of Duty or Battlefield, but just Battlefield, that's right, because there's multiple titles there. Battlefield, I don't feel like there's weapon wheels in there, unless those weapon wheels are really quick and allow you to switch weapons really, really fast. I can't see that in my head. So if I'm wrong there, I am wrong. That's fine by me. But I feel like weapon wheels are a very recent iteration into first-person shooters. So defining arena shooters as kind of having them in there, it feels like a touch of a misnomer. I'm not going to really flag that one. It just feels like you're kind of conflating more modern accessories to gaming design with classic gaming design. And if we're trying to define classic gaming design here, then I take a touch of umbrage.
Every single weapon in the game at once. No two-weapon system to speak of. Power-ups, health, ammo, and armor are all found on the map and do not regenerate for the player when out of combat.
Bingo! As you can see, they recharge a lot faster.
Not in Quake they don't, you fucking pussy. And both teams begin the match with equal starts. These games also tend to boast the best fucking soundtracks.
Okay, this is just me being petty here. I do find it interesting that he's using footage of the Quake Remastered's Horde mode for the fucking arena shooter video that he's making, because this isn't even like, oh, nope, never mind, I'm sorry. This is me now retracting myself. It looks like they're doing deathmatch on one of the Horde mode maps. So I will take that back. I thought I was being very clever there for a second, like, aha, look, and no, if I pay attention, okay, all right, I take it back. He is right about the soundtracks, though.
You could really summarize the spirit of arena shooters by listening to the classic Unreal announcer.
Monster kill! Wicked sick! Godlike! Holy shit!
While some might argue that the first true arena shooters were Quake and Unreal Tournament, it's obvious where those games got their inspiration from. Some of the most revered games of all time are arena shooters. But
nope. Okay. So let's talk about that right there. Saying Quake and Unreal Tournament are the first arena shooters. Now, I want to, again, this is for a historical accuracy perspective. A game isn't an arena shooter simply because it has a deathmatch component and you can play against other people online in said deathmatch component. So you look at Doom, you look at Marathon, you look at Duke Nukem, you look at Quake, you can even look at Half-Life up through 1998. A lot of these first-person shooters are, yep, I am hung up on semantics. We are presenting historical accuracy. Now, again, as I was literally just in the middle of saying, multiplayer modes in games in those days, that was not the point of the game. That was a component. That was a part of it. And deathmatch, being able to play deathmatch online with other people was incredible. It was such a revelation to be able to play these games, these action games, and to be able to get online with other people and play them and get your skills up like that. But that wasn't the point of the game. Like, you're going in, you're playing Doom to play Doom. You're going in to play Duke to play Duke. You're playing Quake to play Quake. these days we've got first-person shooters like Call of Duty, where it's like, I don't know shit about the campaigns of Call of Duty or Battlefield, but the multiplayer seems to be where it's at. The last few Halo games, I don't know anything about their campaigns. I don't hear people talking about their campaigns too much because the multiplayer seems to be where it's at. So there's been a bit of a flip in first-person shooters as to where their priorities kind of lie, if you will, and maybe not even the game's priorities, maybe not the developer's priorities, but the audience's priorities. The audience is in it for the multiplayer. You can play through the campaign, you can play through the single player, but the multiplayer aspect, that kind of connection with people, the esports aspect, that's where a lot of gamers are kind of hanging their hats, at least modern console gaming. So again, but these older retro games, calling them arena shooters is a misnomer because they were just first-person shooters, and one aspect of their gameplay, one of the components was deathmatch. It was just deathmatch back then. It wasn't like arena-style gameplay. We didn't have words for that back then. And calling them that now, when we already have a definition for arena shooter. An arena shooter is, let's go back real quick, multiplayer shooter games, first, like the first real arena shooters, Unreal Tournament, Turok Rage Wars, and Quake 3 Arena, because they were those first-person shooters. They were part of series that traditionally had single-player campaigns, but then these entries came out specifically as like a deathmatch-only game, and that's what made it an arena shooter. So, like, yes, we do have these games that have deathmatch components, but calling them arena shooters is just, it's a bridge too far, and that's why I'm sitting here talking and ranting like a big fucking nerd, because I feel like when you have a platform like this, getting it right, being accurate, and talking about the history of these games is very, very important, and what I'm seeing here is a lack of accuracy or care. And honestly, that's going to pop up more later in the video. Let's see. Yes, I am way hung up on semantics. That's what I do. There's an audience for single, but yeah, new FPS these days are more about multiplayer. Andrew, I would say Serious Sam is not... So there is definitely a semantic hair splitting with arena shooters in single player. But Serious Sam, like, we're talking here, this guy's talking about deathmatch arenas, and anything that has a deathmatch mode is an arena shooter, which it's just not. That's just not accurate in the slightest. Let me back up here a little bit. Love how he says, like, Quake and Unreal Tournament were the first ones, 'cause Quake was in 96 and Unreal Tournament was in 99. We're already off on the timeline, kids! I'm being a nerd! But I'm your dad, and dad's gotta educate sometimes.
While some might argue that the first true arena shooters were Quake and Unreal Tournament, it's obvious where those games got their inspiration from. Some of the most revered games of all time are arena shooters. But lately it seems nobody really cares. At least not about their multiplayer. Single player, yeah, Doom Eternal's kicked ass. But like, why does an 11-year-old game like CSGO continue to dominate Steam charts while a game fresh off the press like Quake Champions can barely scratch 4 digits?
First off, Quake Champions is not fresh off the press. Quake Champions has been in early access and has been around since 2017. It only just fucking recently left early access. So this is like a huge leap. Also, Counter-Strike is multiplayer only. And I didn't even know that a lot of people played Counter-Strike as like a big deal. Like I had no idea up until recently, because that's just not my bag. I've never been a Counter-Strike fan, so I have no idea how many people are playing that. And like, you know, compare like Quake Champions. I love Quake. I do. Quake Champions is just not that good. It's not a good take on the Quake arena shooter format that was established by Quake 3 Arena. Quake Champions is more of a hero shooter, and it's I don't like the design. I don't like the way that they did it. I feel Quake Champions is going to be a divisive take, and I'm not going to get out of pocket here. But Quake Champions has been around for a hot second, and it's kind of struggled the entire time due to a variety of things. So it's not just like Counter-Strike has been around for however long, and they dialed that in back in the day, and they just made modern, like, tiny little improvements. Quake Champions is a different flavor of this format that we're talking about, and it's going to resonate with you, or it's not. It's not my bag. I don't like it very much. So I think what we're talking about here, I think we're comparing apples to oranges, basically.
Is there no mass market appeal for these so-called boomer shooters? Well, there still is, but as we'll see later on in this video, studios didn't quite figure out how to make these games appeal to that broader audience. You might have played Doom 2016's multiplayer and thought, well, that felt antiquated. I feel like a 40-year-old man still clinging to his childhood playing.
Wow. The mass market appeal. So I'm starting to see, this is a point in the video where I'm starting to see, so like, okay, so this video is looking at numbers. And this video is looking at general audiences, and we're talking about whether or not this game is, like, doing numbers or whatever, not about the quality of the game. And even looking at Doom 2016's multiplayer, which I don't think the multiplayer was done by id Software. I think it was outsourced and kind of slapped in there. And that wasn't the point of the game, though. The multiplayer wasn't the point of the game. Like, it's very clear that they didn't focus on that multiplayer aspect. They put everything into the single player, which is what Doom has always been. Like, Doom has deathmatch as a component, but Doom has never been an online multiplayer focused arena shooter. It's about the single player experience. And like, so I don't understand why we're talking about a slapdash multiplayer component and looking at that and judging the entirety of Doom 2016 when really we should be judging it on the single player component. So we're talking about deathmatch in games. That's, yeah, he is using boomer shooter, Doom clone, and arena shooter interchangeably, when an arena shooter is just an online only multiplayer deathmatch game. It's only deathmatch. The entire game is deathmatch. So looking at a game that's primarily single player with a deathmatch component and comparing it to a game that is like only online deathmatch, that's off base immediately. Let's see, just checking the chat real quick. Yep. We're only focusing on AAA titles. Exactly. We're only AAA titling, mass market games, stuff like that. So I'm not really sure why he's conflating all these things, unless the point is just to get people to talk about it. So let's see what else.
They ask you how you are, and you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine, but you just can't get into it because they would never understand.
Perhaps you bought into the craze of lawbreakers and later tried to hide your shame about that. Though developers have tried to revitalize the
cheap shot at lawbreakers there. Like, that's a cheap shot. Yes, it absolutely failed. You could also make the same shot at Battleborn. Battleborn did not get off the ground at all. Does anybody remember Battleborn? The Gearboxes, their version of the hero shooter, they tried to compete with Overwatch and they put out Battleborn, and that just bombed. Oh my god, Battleborn. But Lawbreakers was kind of a bigger deal because that was from Cliffy B. So it's kind of a cheap shot there. Let's back up a second.
Never understand.
Perhaps you bought into the craze of lawbreakers and later tried to hide your shame about that. Though developers have tried to revitalize the arena shooter genre, it seems none have really been successful. And since Lawbreakers, it appears
no one has dared try.
But why? Well, that's the big question of the day.
Wait a minute. No, hold on. Not to bust out another tab here, but when did Lawbreakers come out? When did Lawbreakers? 2017? No one has tried to make an arena shooter. No one's tried to popularize an arena shooter since 2017 with Lawbreakers. I didn't even make that. Oh my god, Jack Wall and Jason Graves did the soundtrack for that game? Holy shit, I'm gonna need to look that up. oh my god, I'm gonna have to look up that soundtrack. But you're telling me since 2017, no one's tried to... Do you not know what Overwatch or Valorant or Apex Legends is? Like, does not... Okay. Since 2017, no one's tried. Oh my... I'm sorry, that's, That just made me giggle.
Fall, we have to take a trip back to witness the rise. Like I said, Wolfenstein 3D put FPS on the map, and in 1993, Doom solidified its position as a legitimate contender. It's hard to grasp just how influential these two games have been. You could basically draw a line from any shooter released in the last 30 years and trace it back to Doom. So how does a genre
That's accurate. A fully accurate statement. And, you know, Wolfenstein setting the precedent with Doom solidifying it. I know a lot of people feel like Doom was the first, and a lot of people consider Doom the first. I did in my video on Doom. No, it was on Wolfenstein. Every great second album had a good first album, and in my head, Doom is the incredible second album, where Wolfenstein is the impressive first album that solidified the basics of what the band was trying to go for. So yes, accurate statement. 100% on board with that, and you absolutely can draw a line from any shooter in the last 30 years back to Doom, back to Wolfenstein. Wolfenstein today plays like any number of modern indie retro shooters that are out on the market, and it holds up against all of those, which I think that's a testament to that game and solidifying the fundamentals.
that is that influential lose its influence and presence? Well, every masterpiece has its cheap copy, and the release of Doom spawned a rat race to emulate it. So in the early 90s, the entire FPS genre was pretty new, and it was separated into two categories. There was Doom and Doom clones, and you had to pick between one of those.
Well, yes and no, because Doom was Doom. Doom had a sequel, Doom 2, but the Doom clones, there was no name for first-person shooters when this series, oh god, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for that. No, Doom clones were just what they were called, because we didn't have the term first-person shooter. That didn't come along until later, so it wasn't like a question of choosing between the two. It was Doom and then Doom clones. We just called those first-person shooters, those early first-person shooters were just called Doom clones. And it's not like they were lesser or less than or not as good as. And some of them, in different ways, did better or achieved different things than Doom. Doom is the classic, but they were just called Doom clones. That's what they were. And I think this is an unfair comparison to make, setting that up. Calling Duke Nukem 3D, Marathon, and Dark Forces Doom clones? Like, and setting that up as this kind of derogatory term? Like, yeah, there were Doom clones because that was what the genre was called. But, oh my god, does that lessen the things that they did by setting it up and framing it like that?
Fun fact, at one point the term first-person shooter was less commonly used on internet forums than the term Doom clone.
Yeah, great roundabout way of finally getting there, my dude.
Were simpler times when news media blamed violent video games for real-world violence, and I guess they still do that. But the point is,
true.
Looking at shooters today, there's such a wide variety of different experiences and subgenres, but back at this one point, there was only one viable form of this content. So Doom blew everyone's balls off in 1993, bringing with it this revolutionary new deathmatch mode. Doom also started the trend of network multiplayer and LAN parties, though primitive and only allowing up to 4 players. A year later, Doom launched its official online multiplayer component. Not to mention it offered co-op too. Sure, many of the titles I discuss are more renowned for their single player, but what gave these games staying power was the multiplayer. But before anybody could try to one-up Doom, id Software dropped their new album. Nobody could touch Doom's success, and its sequel only furthered the craze and desire to topple id Software's new godlike status. Meanwhile, Apple and Microsoft were starting to get competitive in the emerging market of PC gaming. Macintosh needed an answer to Doom.
Yeah, Emily, I thoroughly agree with you. That's the whole point of why I'm doing this video today and why I'm being so pedantic and sticking to the semantics is because these games are more than just their multiplayer components. You know, we're only showing the footage of multiplayer when these games, their single player components were so fucking groundbreaking. Like, that should not be understated or misrepresented. Their single player components were so fucking groundbreaking. That's what made these games what they were. The component of deathmatch was so new that, I mean, like, not a lot of people could just go on and do that. You had to be able to, like a LAN party. You would have to pick up your entire desktop and transport it to like some smelly basement or wherever and connect your computer to someone else's computer via Ethernet cables and whatnot. It wasn't just like you could just go online and play multiplayer with people. That did come into being as modems and routers were put into place, and it wasn't just that we could just go in deathmatch. Like, there was this passionate base of players who did go and do that, but the single player of these games, that was the revolution there. And this deathmatch component was like the stepping stone to like what modern multiplayer is nowadays.
These games are getting really realistic. Next year I might even play in the big Doom tournament.
A couple months after Doom 2, one company managed to earn a piece of the FPS pie. Sup, fellas? My name's Bungie, and I feel like running a marathon. Though Marathon never became a household name, the game proved that competent alternatives to Doom could be made, and as time would pass, Bungie would be the ones to come back with a vengeance against the arena shooter that defied them. And then,
oops, I'm detecting some bias here. I'm detecting a lot of bias here. Marathon was not the first, including that, like, it's not the first game that I would pick in the history of FPS that could be held up next to Doom as a quality first-person shooter title. And make no mistake, that's not slander against Marathon. Marathon is an incredible game. If anything, we shouldn't be talking about Marathon as compared to Doom. We should be talking about Marathon as compared to Half-Life, because Marathon did all the narrative and deep storytelling like 4 years before Half-Life did. And that would be a much more accurate comparison. Well, Marathon, I wouldn't even, it's just not the same. They're not the same. They're not built the same. And comparing Doom to Marathon is, it's not the same. And even saying, like, Marathon is a great example of, like, competent first-person shooters outside of Doom. There were plenty of other, like, let's see, we had Blake Stone, System Shock, Rise of the Triad. We had Heretic. Like, Marathon came out the same day as Rise of the Triad. So there are plenty of other competent first-person shooters. I'm sensing a little Bungie bias, which is fine. There's room for all kinds of stands in this household, and so I don't want to be dismissive of someone who is like a huge fan of Bungie. It's just that we need to remember our biases when we're talking about the historical perspective. Like, I'm a huge id Software fanboy, but I also recognize that there were other people who were doing things back then that were different from Doom, arguably better than Doom. But we shouldn't let our biases get in the way of a historical presentation. Let's see. High-functioning medium. Problem with the whole discourse is the ones defining terms are modernists, not OG players. It's like G-Man talking about Halo. He's not invested enough in it to speak on it so definitively. Yes, absolutely. I thoroughly agree with you. It's, you know, that's again why I want to present the historical perspective so that we don't have this kind of like weird, like, carnival funhouse mirror definition of games from back in the day, especially when we think like, when we try to think about what they were, what they felt like back then, as opposed to what they actually were. It's I know, semantics, but it's important. It's all very important.
And in 1995, George Lucas was sitting there like, before I ruin the next trilogy of Star Wars films, I want to usher in the golden age of Star Wars video games. Bam! Star Wars Dark Force.
I'm sorry. Okay, the first time I watched this video, I laughed out loud because George Lucas didn't have anything to do with Dark Forces. He didn't have anything to do with the creation of it. The developers came up with the idea, threw it up the ladder at LucasArts, Lucasfilm. They came back down, they approved it. Fucking George Lucas, he even played a test of it and was like, guys, this is a little violent. George Lucas had nothing to do with this. Okay, this is one of the parts in the video where I'm like, do your research. Fucking read something. Read a Wikipedia article. Okay, I'm sorry. Forgive me, I got a little passionate.
Forces comes out, the first official FPS game for Star Wars. Though it was called a Doom clone, before this, people had been making fan.
Sorry, I do want to just quickly address in the chat. Emily, yes, George, I don't know that he actively spoke out against more violent Star Wars games, like actively spoke out against it, but he did have reservations about Dark Forces specifically because you could actually shoot and kill Imperial officers as opposed to just stormtroopers. Stormtroopers wore helmets that made them faceless, it made it a little bit more family friendly to have that kind of because you never saw the human aspect of the stormtroopers. Seeing the human faces did give him pause, and I know eventually at some point he came around to it, but so I don't know to what degree he actively spoke out against it, but he did offer quite a few reservations during development of the game. So you are right there, absolutely.
And mods of Doom with levels based on the Death Star. And Star Wars had such a rabid, wide audience that when they heard of a computer game where you could shoot stormtroopers in first person, it drew a whole new crowd to arena shooters. But one of the most important changes Dark Forces introduced was this radical new concept to FPS. Looking up and down. We all start somewhere, right?
It's true. It was one of the first. It is one of the first shooters that introduced limited mouse look. So that's an accurate statement, and I stand by that, and I applaud.
Concept to FPS. Looking up and down. We all start somewhere, right? So FPS was starting to evolve, but Dark Forces had no multiplayer, so it didn't directly threaten the other online arena shooters. It wasn't until 1996 that a new king of FPS emerged. The throne of Doom had its first true threat.
You're right.
Don't have time.
Dark Forces is not an arena shooter at all.
Was the first truly successful Doom clone, and 3D Realms succeeded with this game largely because of its change in.
Wait, what do you mean the first truly successful Doom clone? What the fuck are you talking about here? Did you never play Heretic or Hexen or Dark Forces or Descent? Did you not play any of those? Did we not take any of those? Yeah, Duke Nukem 3D came out near the beginning of 1996. Fun fact, Chex Quest, I believe, came out before Duke Nukem 3D. Let me just double check my math here on that. Oh, I didn't write it down here in this book. Boo. Hold on. I have this all written down in in various notebooks. Maybe because I'm working on a series of videos called The History of First-Person Shooters. Let's see. No, Duke Nukem, January 29th, 1996. So no, Quake Chex Quest did not come out before Duke Nukem 3D. But, so, I think what he's trying to say here is that Duke Nukem was the first mass market success as compared to Doom, where Doom is the game that everybody knew about because you couldn't get away from Doom. Duke Nukem 3D was a game that everybody knew about because you couldn't get away from it. So yeah, okay, if that's a statement that we're trying to make, if we're only talking about mass market appeal, but to say the first truly successful first-person shooter after Doom, again, you have Rise of the Triad, you have Marathon. Marathon did very well in the Apple markets. It just didn't do very well outside of the Apple markets because Mac gaming back then was kind of even more nerdy than PC gaming was. but System Shock did well. Hexen, we had Descent, Dark Forces, which we literally just talked about. There were plenty of other successful first-person shooters before Duke Nukem 3D. So I think we're really glossing over. Oh God, I just read High Functioning Medium's comment. Hang on. I think we're really glossing over the timeline here, and I think we're really glossing over what defines a successful first-person shooter and what were impactful. Also, yes, let's petition Actman to do a video on immersive sims and survival horror. Let's please do that. Under the Mayo would have such a time. God, I love Mayo. I respect Mayo. You know, I love Mayo. Boy, could he be salty about this shit. This is why I don't feel bad doing this, because if Mayo really wanted to go in on it, he would go in even harder than this. God, I love Mayo. I really want to see that just so I could see Mayo's reaction. That would be wonderful.
Style. Instead of this futuristic or sci-fi setting or killing demons, it was set in more modern times where you're fighting like alien pigs and stuff. It also added elements of comedy and satire to a genre that was primarily focused on murdering everything in front of you.
Make me.
My kind of party.
Oh, am I gonna get demonetized for? No, he's not getting demonetized.
Duke Nukem 3D also
I mean, saying that I'm just gonna call them boomer shooters. Calling boomer shooters back in the day primarily focused on just killing everything in front of you. That really diminishes the impact of, again, Marathon, Dark Forces. Dark Forces was like very interactive with storytelling elements. I think that diminishes the accomplishments of other first-person shooters. I think it diminishes the genre as a whole, just to say that it was mostly about just running around and killing things. So
lampooned a lot of Hollywood action
let's
hero
just back
tropes,
that up
and with
just
his
a-
hilarious
My kind of party. Wish I had
I of course had to click right back to this segment. I'm no
3D
God, I'm pausing it. I'm no prude. I'm all about the sexual stuff. It's just not exactly where I wanted to reland the stream.
also lampooned a lot of Hollywood action hero tropes.
Thank
and with
you.
his hilarious over-the-top one-liners, the Duke became the new face of first-person shooters. More importantly, he introduced the idea that the player could be more than a mindless, silent
MTD says, not sure if you know, you could use your arrow keys to move back and forth. Psh, look at that. I'm learning today. Thank you for that.
More importantly, he introduced the idea that the player could be more than a mindless, silent killing machine. While everyone was splurging over the Duke,
And again, that's not true either. Look at Dark Forces, because that was fully voice acted. And yeah, again, I keep making the same points because he keeps saying the same damn things incorrectly.
be more than a mindless, silent killing machine. While everyone was splurging over the Duke and his balls of steel, id Software was down in the laboratory, cooking up their next hit. Oh, those 2D sprites are so cute. 3D realms? More like 2D bullshit. Fuck you. Check out these 3D graphics in Quake. Quake fundamentally changed online first-person shooters in more ways than one. For starters, the process of finding and joining matches was much easier and accessible. And second, this is what arena shooters looked like a year prior to Quake.
I wonder what game that is. Like, I don't recognize that game. And that's also a wonderfully inaccurate representation of what arena shooters looked like a year before Quake, because we had Descent and we had Terminator Future Shock, which did 3D polygonal environments and shit like that. So I feel like that's a little bit of cherry picking. Just a little bit of cherry picking. Let's see. Oh, what did I miss? Logo. Let's see. Hold on. Functioning medium. Never feel bad about your editing if a million sub Actman can do logos standing next to each other. Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. Was him with the yeah.
Films? More like 2D bullshit. Fuck you. Check out these 3D graphics in Quake. Quake fundamentally changed online first-person shooters in more ways than one. For starters, the process of finding and joining matches.
So that game that he was showing was called Gloom. Okay. I've never heard of it either. That's yeah, great catch.
Quake. So the advancements it made were just out of this world. Just like the ability to look up and down, a fully rendered 3D FPS multiplayer title was a massive revolution for the time. Quake would
Again, would like to point out that a fully 3D multiplayer game came first a year before in Descent, and you could look up and down in other games before Quake. It's just we're looking at high watermarks in the genre and calling them the first when they're not necessarily the first. They're just the next step up. There are other steps between those layers and levels.
Later spawned its own convention and popularized the art of speedrunning with the website Quake Done Quick.
That is accurate.
Also argue that Quake was responsible for the birth.
And Quake Done Quick would eventually turn into Games Done Quick, which is what we have, yearly for the annual speedrunning events and everything. Games Done Quick came out of Quake Done Quick. A very interesting little connection there.
Of esports, as the Red Annihilation tournament drew over 2,000 participants. The winner received a fucking Ferrari from John Carmack, the co-founder of id Software. As a result of Quake's popularity in the competitive esports scene, several pro leagues started to sprout up as well. It seemed that arena shooters would only get better from here on out, and anytime id Software faced competition, they answered swiftly and decisively. So there was a lot of competition to topple what id was doing. But in 1997, something would happen that would alter the course of FPS games and lay the foundation for the fall of arena shooters.
No!
That-
No! Look, I don't want to throw shade on GoldenEye, but now we're really comparing apples to oranges. Also, fun fact, Turok, the dinosaur hunter, came out on the N64 before GoldenEye did, and so that's just a little thing I wanted to point out. So let's continue. The dawn of the console FPS.
Today, a large portion of new releases are available on console and PC, but this was not the case back then. Whatever Nintendo was doing had jack shit to do with id Software's control of FPS and arena shooter market, right? Console gaming and PC gaming were two complete opposites.
Absolutely.
Almost no overlap, and anytime a PC game was brought to console, it was usually a butchered version of it. So console FPS titles were never considered.
Oh god, that's such a... God, that's sorry, I'm just thinking about fucking The Last of Us PC port that just came out and how terrible that is. And what a long way we've come from PC games being so popular that they got a port onto consoles, and then the console port was super shitty. Now we're getting PC ports of console games, and those that just made me feel very depressed for a second there. God, guys, go play the Turok remasters. There's fire, absolute fire. The best way to play those games.
With almost no overlap, and anytime a PC game was brought to console, it was usually a butchered version of it. So console FPS titles were never considered a legitimate threat. That is, until a certain secret agent made his debut in the 3D world of gaming.
I have so many mixed feelings about GoldenEye. Because, GoldenEye's not really remembered for its single-player campaign. It's a lot of people played multiplayer with it, and I think that's maybe a good starting point for the actual rise of arena shooters, of people wanting to play games for multiplayer-only purposes. I think it would be a great argument to say that GoldenEye might have been where the rise of actual arena shooters came from. But we're to say, I don't know very many people who gave a shit about the campaign in GoldenEye. I never played it. I don't remember anything about it, but I played so much of that multiplayer, that sweet multiplayer. Had so many parties with people, get together, do the 4-player split screen. No odd job. You know what I'm talking about. We were there. So yeah, it's hard to look at GoldenEye. It's hard to look at GoldenEye even as a first-person shooter in my head, because it felt like just this game that you played with other people. Whereas first person shooters, I remember I would sit down and play them on my computer for hours, mastering the levels, going through the games, finding all the weapons and secrets and everything. So I would absolutely argue that GoldenEye is a great starting point for arena shooters, games that were multiplayer only because certain games just wanted that aspect of it. Oh, that just came off the top of my head. That's a pretty good point. There we go. Let's do this, Act Man.
Essentially brought FPS games to consoles. But why weren't shooters popular on console prior to GoldenEye? Well, if you could, would you really want to play this with this?
Yes.
Yeah, no, didn't think so.
Yes,
Arena
I would.
Shooters was simply too fast and chaotic to be played on controller, and the N64 controller was already a mutated monster.
That is N64 slander. That is slander. I'm one of the few people I know who's an apologist for the N64 controller. It's perfect. It's just fucking perfect.
To begin with, like GoldenEye just barely worked with this thing. Again, at this point, arena shooters were the only type of shooter. It's like you were moving fast. Of course you were. But this entire stigma that FPS titles couldn't work on console changed with GoldenEye because ReACTing actually stopped for a second and said, hey, does the player need to go fast? Turns out no. In fact, who would have thought slowing down movement and forcing players to make methodical decisions in combat could even be more interesting? You know, there might be something to that style of gameplay.
But you went plenty fast. You went plenty fast in fucking GoldenEye. There was no, like, really slowing down or making methodical choices. Unless we're talking about the single player, which was kind of janky. And also Counter-Strike, as slowing down and making methodical choices. Like, sure, there's tactics and you're talking and with people and shit, but it's still fast gameplay. I'm not sure what we're trying to say here.
Console changed with GoldenEye because ReACTing actually stopped for a second and said, hey, does the player need to go fast? Turns out no. In fact, who would have thought slowing down movement and forcing players to make methodical decisions in combat could even be more interesting? You know, there might be something to that style of gameplay.
More
GoldenEye
interesting.
didn't have an online multiplayer, so again, it didn't directly affect the popularity of Quake or other arena shooters, but couch co-op and local play became a thing, and GoldenEye planted a very important seed, one that would eventually sprout and grow to overthrow the arena shooter craze.
Yeah, high functioning medium, definitely. I do get the impression that he's making this entirely off secondhand knowledge. This is like the kid who said, my uncle works at Nintendo, and then he talks about how Luigi is a playable character in Mario 64. You know? Oh boy, this is... God, it was about this part, I think, when I watched it the first time that I had to back out and go calm down. Because this is really not good.
Couch co-op and local play became a thing, and GoldenEye planted a very important seed, one that would eventually sprout and grow to overthrow the arena shooter craze. But before that would happen, id Software saw the success of GoldenEye and was like, oh yeah, Rare, well played, but we can do that too. Yo, Midway, go make Doom 64 for the kiddies. And you know, Doom 64 didn't make waves, but it established their presence outside of the PC market, and other developers that typically catered.
It does, I don't think he's intentionally trying to state this, but it does feel like with that statement he's saying that Doom 64 was a response to GoldenEye, which it wasn't. It came out the same year as GoldenEye because there were a lot of games being made for the N64, so that's... Again, you know, semantics might be something that a lot of people might, we're splitting hairs here, but like a statement like this, in a video like this, with a platform like this, gives the impression that certain games were responses to other games. These were all being made at the same time. These were all being made at the same time. You know, like, the newer consoles were starting to match PC in terms of power, and, like, making ports for your consoles was a way of getting your games into the hands of other gamers who might not otherwise have access to them. It wasn't a response to anything. They came out the same year. They were both in development at the same time.
Doom 64 for the kiddies! And, you know, Doom 64 didn't make waves, but it established their presence outside of the PC market, and other developers that typically catered solely to the PC crowd would try to do the same. There would be attempts to bring arena shooters to console. In 1998, Epic Games released Unreal, which sold 1.5 million copies by 2002. Arena shooters were still growing as a genre, but 1998 was a year of innovation for shooters in general, and several new subgenres started to pop up. Metal Gear Solid emphasized stealth and discouraged.
Okay, let's talk about this right here. Subgenres of arena shooters, of shooting games. Why the fuck are we talking about Metal Gear Solid in a video about first-person shooters? I do not understand this right here. I do not understand this. Like, it might be Edzor says that MGS is his favorite arena shooter. There you go. Maybe I'm the one who's out of touch, not the kids. Clearly, Metal Gear Solid, best arena shooter of all time. I remember rocket jumping with it and running around and having to switch my my mouse from port to port so that I could get out of Psycho Mantis's grasp. Damn it. God damn it. I didn't want to be like super salty about this, but this is such a weird reach to try and say, oh, fans of shooters wanted newer experiences than just running and shooting things. Look at Metal Gear Solid as a great example. It's such a reach. That is such a reach. Gaming Marine, yes, I would love to say that this is supposed to foreshadow the implementation of stealth segments in FPS games later on, but I don't, if I remember correctly, it doesn't touch on it.
Growing as a genre, but 1998 was a year of innovation for shooters in general, and several new subgenres started to pop up. Metal Gear Solid emphasized stealth and discouraged combat. Rainbow Six was set in a more modern, realistic setting and brought a tactical, cooperative aspect to shooting games.
Which is a fantastic point to make, the tactical shooters. Rainbow Six is way more action-oriented, I think, these days, but back then, like, the idea of a tactical shooter, slow tactical shooter, one shot, one kill, very realistic, that was mind-blowing at the time. But I wouldn't call Rainbow Six a first-person shooter. Like, it's set in first person, and you can shoot things with it, but it's more of like a tactical, almost strategy game in first person. Like, there's so many games where that are set in a first-person perspective, but since shooting is not the primary mechanic, I wouldn't call it a first-person shooter. Even if you can shoot things in first person, that doesn't make it a first-person shooter by design. Rainbow Six is a great tactical shooter, absolutely, and it is set in first person, but calling it a first-person shooter, that's a bit of a gray area that I would kind of put the gavel on and object to.
Star Siege Tribes, a game I never heard of prior to this, was notable for introducing massive multiplayer matches with 32v32 lobbies, something that would become the standard for Battlefield and Battlefront.
Yeah, Star Siege Tribes was an amazing game, wow, like you could, if it wasn't for the size and scope of Star Siege Tribes, I would say that was part of the birth of the arena shooter, because it is literally, it's online only, you could play with some bots. The combat arenas were so huge, and 32v32, boy was it janky at the time. It was so janky. I love Star Siege Tribes. You can actually go and download it for free from the Star Siege website these days, which I plan on doing, and I plan on catching up with this game again. I think Star Siege is an excellent example of one of the first, like, arena-style shooters, but because of the scope of it, the size, there were these massive game worlds that you would play in. It was almost sandboxy. I wouldn't intentionally qualify it as an arena shooter because arenas are usually tighter and more locked in that you had to run around in.
32v32 lobbies, something that would become the standard for Battlefield and Battlefront. Arena shooters were still the king in terms of multiplayer, but these other titles represented a growing change in taste. Gamers were starting to experience something different, and they wanted more, and Valve provided more with Half-Life. Now, prior to Half,
I would like to make what I feel, or I have been told, is a controversial statement. Half-Life is a boomer shooter. Half-Life didn't do anything incredibly different otherwise, outside of putting more of a cinematic narrative feel on the game. From a mechanical standpoint, from a design standpoint, it's still a boomer shooter. Half-Life 2 really, really changed things up, and I would not qualify as a boomer shooter in the slightest. But the first Half-Life is absolutely a boomer shooter. It plays like one, it feels like one, it runs like one. They just have cinematic set pieces with a deep story, and I stand by that. Like, I truly, truly do stand by that. I think that a lot of people hold up Half-Life in a way that people used to hold up Doom, with this kind of like reverence where they forget how the game actually feels and plays. I really look forward to getting to that game in my history series so that I could really, really dive into the mechanics of it. But oh yeah, Medium. I'm actually going to be doing that. But it's a boomer shooter. That is my opinion.
provided more with Half-Life.
You're still shooting things. It's still
Now,
a fast-paced shooter game.
Half-Life, arena shooters had competent, fun single players. Half-Life evolved in a way that few arena shooters ever would after this point. Many developers underestimated the importance of world building, storytelling, atmosphere, and cutscenes.
Not really, because Marathon did it 4 years earlier, and Dark Forces did it 3 years earlier. So, like, Half-Life just put so much more focus on it and so much more cinematic feel into it. There were other games that were doing this at the time. Again, it's like, this is a watermark, a high watermark. So then when you're presenting this historical perspective, when you just look at the high watermarks, you forget about all the other steps. It's like, hey, my kid was 5'3" and now he's 5'6". It's like, there were inches in between. There were inches in the growth between. And it's like, it's not that, he never hit 5'4", he never hit 5'5", he just went to 5'6". Like, the gaming landscape wasn't stagnant between Quake and Half-Life, or between Doom and Half-Life. There were other games that were doing similar things that Half-Life was doing. It's just that Half-Life did it in such a way that it captured attention on a massive scale. Those high watermarks, the mass appeal, the mass, like, the mass marketing is what I feel like he's looking at here.
Half-Life managed to evolve the single-player side of FPS while also putting its own spin on the arena shooter format. If games like Quake and Unreal had emphasized their single-player the way Doom did, maybe they'd still be relevant today.
Oops. Oh boy. Oh boy. Oh boy. Oh boy. Oh boy. I'm going to run that back. While
also putting its own spin on the arena shooter format. If games like Quake and Unreal had emphasized their single player the way Doom did, maybe they'd still be relevant today.
Okay, nope, I'm not. So, putting the emphasis on their single player was what they did. Unreal's I've only played a little bit of Unreal, right? And I played that to capture some footage for a video that I'm doing. That's actually coming out in a couple of days. I'm doing a video on Fortnite. I hope you'll be here. I want to have it out tomorrow. Looks like it might be out on Saturday instead. I've been working on it for a while. But they did put emphasis on the single player. They did. Like, and Quake was relevant for the time. Doom is relevant again, because it only just recently put like extra emphasis on single player. It evolved its single player emphasis. Like, if you're using Doom 2016 and Doom Eternal as like fucking the examples of how Doom put emphasis on the single player, right? And then comparing it to Quake and Unreal, no, that is a fallacy. That is such a fallacy right there in your argument. And maybe they would be relevant. I don't know. You're using all sorts of footage from the Quake remaster, which just came out a year or two ago, and boy, oh boy, did people pick up on that. So I'm wondering, I'm wondering whether or not you saying it's not relevant is a relevant argument. Sir, Quake is still very relevant. And I'm not just saying that as a Quake fanboy. Like, the remaster was like a shot heard around the world, and it got picked up, and there are a lot of people playing it. It's on consoles. It's on PC. You can't, like, just because it hasn't had a new release outside of Quake Champions, I wouldn't say it's irrelevant. Unreal? Well, maybe if Epic hadn't, like, taken it down off of every major digital format. Like, Unreal is still relevant in the Unreal Engine. It's not relevant as a game series because Epic hasn't put any time into it. Oh, that made me mad.
That's what I'm saying. Quake had taken the gaming world by storm, and with the prevalence of modding, many others were keen on taking the genre to greater heights. And what better way to try and dethrone Quake than with a mod made from it? Team Fortress Classic was an incredible turning point in the industry. Developed as a mod for Quake, Valve saw the potential in this experimental shooter and did something many didn't expect. They hired the creators of the mod to work on it as a full-fledged title. This introduced the idea of classes and heroes and preset loadouts as opposed to even starts and everything being on the map. But a hero shooter wasn't the only new kid on the block the likes of Quake and Doom had to compete with, because just 2 short months after Team Fortress Classic's release, another mod would take the world of FPS by storm, and it wouldn't let go for another 23 years. With Rainbow Six, tactical shooters were established, but Counter-Strike took the best aspects of Rainbow Six and Half-Life and threw them in a blender. Its popularity was so unprecedented, Counter-Strike was actually surpassing the games it was emulating. Especially impressive since there was no single player to speak of. Just pure, raw, multiplayer FPS goodness. Counter-Strike also revived LAN parties, and its competitive one-life team-based design created a new style of FPS esports. While the effects weren't immediate and Quake and Unreal Tournament were still wildly popular, something about Counter-Strike proved to be more...
Why does he keep talking about Quake, like, without any other... I think we've seen, like... Just now we saw our second batch of footage from Quake 2, but he keeps talking about Quake, like Quake 1, like Quake 1 only. Now, I don't have the immediate... Or do I? Nope, here's the tab with Counter-Strike. When was it released as a mod? That's the question. Yeah, revived? That's a great question. Mod for Half-Life, Few initial betas, June 1999. Yeah, so it was released in 2000. So by this point, we've got Quake 3, Quake 3 Arena. We've also got Unreal Tournament. It keeps referring to Unreal Tournament like it's the first Unreal. And I don't understand, like, we're using a very loose timeline here. He keeps talking about Quake, like, by the time 2000 rolls around, this 4-year-old game is still dominating the multiplayer area, where Quake 3 is out by then. Quake 3 was direct competition with Unreal Tournament near the end of 1999. Quake 3 actually sold graphics cards. It released with a requirement to have certain graphics cards, where Unreal Tournament could be played in software mode only, and it was seen as this huge risk, but Quake 3 actually sold graphics cards because of how popular it was. And, like, look, I'm not going to throw shade on Counter-Strike because it's just not my style of game. It's never been my style, and I don't really care to play it, and I'm also not going to bag it just because it's not my thing. But, like, I think I really feel like we're kind of inflating the power of Counter-Strike here. Yes, it's popular. Yes, it's huge. It's just like Call of Duty in that, yes, it's popular. Yes, it's huge. But, like, revival?
Just pure, raw, multiplayer FPS goodness.
Yep. Yeah, Quake 3 Arena and Unreal Tournament. And that just...
Strike also revived LAN parties, and its competitive one-life team-based design created a new style of FPS esports. While the effects weren't immediate and Quake and Unreal Tournament were still wildly popular, something about Counter-Strike proved to be more interesting to the FPS gamer. Now, despite Half-Life and Counter-Strike's success, there was still very much a demand for new arena shooters, and the release of Unreal Tournament in 1999 proved this beyond a shadow of a doubt.
bro, like, where are we going in the timeline here? Like, if someone can help me out, I don't see... Counter-Strike began as a mod of Half-Life's engine. Took him a month and a half. Like, so we're seeing betas. We're seeing betas for Counter-Strike. So maybe people were working with it, or maybe playing earlier betas or earlier versions before September 2000. Because this was released November 9th, 2000. We're talking about, like, fucking Counter-Strike, like, it's been... It was initially developed and released as a Half-Life modification in 1999. Okay, fine. There we go. That's what I'm talking about here. But so then, I guess, there is fucking... Oh my god, this timeline is so loose and wibbly-wobbly.
Doubt. There's a reason the Unreal Engine in 1990 very much a demand for new arena shooters, and the release of Unreal Tournament in 1999 proved...
Now, okay, so, and again, semantics, but just a few minutes ago he was talking about before Counter-Strike, Quake and Unreal Tournament were still very popular, but then now we're talking about the release of Unreal Tournament in 1999. Like, God, guy, keep track of your own narrative.
This beyond a shadow of a doubt. There's a reason the Unreal Engine is named the way it is, because Unreal Tournament was such a highly modular game, and it put the same tools the developers used to make it in the hands of the player base. Cliff Bleszinski, the lead designer, attributed...
The Unreal Engine was named after the first Unreal game. It has nothing to...
Shadow of a doubt. There's a reason the Unreal Engine is named the way it is, because Unreal Tournament was such a highly modular game, and it put the same tools the developers used to make it
Halo Strike Counter Wars, yes.
Base. Cliff Bleszinski, the lead designer, attributed much of the game's success to the Unreal community. But while most shooters around this era were either set in the future or more modern times, one game series came along to take us back to the past. Medal of Honor. While today it's largely been forgotten and replaced by its younger brother Call of Duty, Medal of Honor opened the floodgates for the hordes of World War II shooters. And this began a trend of much shorter time to kills, where anybody who could point a gun could get a kill. While console shooters were on the rise, arena shooters from PC were able to find a home on these new platforms. Of course, they had to make movement and gameplay changes that were less chaotic and accessible to controller. Games like Time Splitters and Perfect Dark showed it could be done. And while GoldenEye, Perfect Dark, Half-Life, Team Fortress, Counter-Strike, and Medal of Honor all introduced a new spin on this genre, arena shooters still held their ground. But the earth began to crumble, and in 2001, the fall of arena shooters was firmly set in motion. And it couldn't be stopped.
Medium, thank you for being here for a little bit, man. Yeah, I'm looking forward to your thoughts on the rest of this stream. Does anyone want to tell Actman that Halo started off as a strategy game? That Bungie was developing a strategy game before they turned it into a first-person shooter? Does anybody want to tell him that? Because I don't know I don't know that how he would react to that. But let's talk about how arena shooters were going to completely fall with this is the second time that he's mentioned that this is the solidification or the start of the fall. He said that with GoldenEye, now we're talking about Halo. So I know he's a Halo freak. I know that because I just went through some of his videos just to kind of educate myself. Oh, he's a stan. Oh, we've got some bias coming.
Still held their ground, but the earth began to crumble, and in 2001, the fall of arena shooters was firmly set in motion, and it couldn't be stopped. The legacy and importance of Combat Evolved should be no secret to any gamer, at least of all my audience. You see, most arena shooters of the time and its emulators like Counter-Strike were still very hardcore experiences, but Halo appealed to both. It was designed as a party shooter game, something that offered the same casual 4-player fun of any Nintendo game, but in a much more mature sci-fi setting. With System Link, LAN parties for console could now emulate what online multiplayer had been doing for years. Now, some debate has been had over whether Halo is an arena shooter or not. While I think it's much more similar to this older genre of game than something like Call of Duty, anyone who's played Quake or Doom will tell you, fuck no, Halo isn't an arena shooter.
Halo Combat Evolved is a boomer shooter. Yeah, it is. It's just got different implementations. You can drive vehicles, and you got a two weapon limit. But I feel it's just as much a boomer shooter as Half-Life is. I would say, with Halo, that is kind of the real hinge between boomer shooters and the more cinematic console shooters. Yes, Halo was the bridge, absolutely. I think it straddles that line. I feel like Halo 2 is definitely more in the console shooter range than anything else, but you still have a lot of boomer shooter mechanics like medpack pickups. Your shield recharges, yes, but the way it plays, the way it feels, I would absolutely say it's a boomer shooter. But it's as it says, combat evolved, and it did start to build that bridge between what boomer shooters were being made then and where they are now. So that's my little take on that.
Movement is much slower. You can only carry 2 weapons, not to mention melee and grenades weren't treated as their own weapons on a dial, regenerating health, etc. But Halo did share many of the same principles of arena shooters. Deathmatch equals Slayer, right? All weapons and power-ups are found on the map, and they still are. But Combat Evolved marked a big shift in the strategy of selling FPS games. They had mostly been catered to hardcore gamers on PC, but console was where the money truly was. Like Half-Life, Halo excelled in both its single-player and multiplayer offerings, spawning a multimedia franchise worth billions, with a story that captured the hearts and minds of millions of gamers. While Doom was so successful it coined the term Doom clone, Halo was much the same, spawning the phrase Halo killer. Developers were no longer trying to dethrone Doom and compete with arena shooters. They were trying to compete with Halo. At this point, arena shooters weren't on life support, but they were sweating. Had Xbox Live been ready in time?
I don't know about that. I'm just gonna name off a few games that came out around that time. 2001, Serious Sam, Return to Castle Wolfenstein, Red Faction, 2002, Jedi Knight 2, Battlefield 1942, Unreal Tournament 2003. In 2003, we had Postal 2, the first Call of Duty 2004. We had Far Cry, Doom 3, and then that's when Halo 2 and Half-Life 2 come out. So I wouldn't say they were sweating at that point. I think that Halo definitely created something new, something that consoles, it began the shift from these shooters being primarily PC focused and then moving to consoles, and this being a game that was, exclusively made for consoles, and console shooters then becoming the new hotness. And I feel like that's really where more of a focus is these days with most AAA big budget first person shooters, is the console first, PC port afterward, if you even put anything out on PC. Which is that's the nature of the game. Things evolve. There are plenty of PC only boomer shooters, retro shooters that are made in the indie market, which the indie market itself is so wide and deep that it's practically its own it's practically its own double A market, if you will. But no, they were not sweating. They were not sweating at this point.
And for the release of Combat Evolved, it might have been game over right then and there for arena shooters. Instead, the genre saw some continued success, and franchises like Quake, Doom, and Unreal adapted to the growing console market and made their own games for these platforms, which garnered a pretty decent player base. I myself enjoyed Jedi Academy, Unreal Tournament, and Republic Commando for a time, but after this generation of console, it would be a long time before I ever played another arena shooter again. 2004 is the year that arena shooters started to fall, and the success of games.
Wait, which year is it? You said 2001 with Halo, and now it's 2004. Just pick a fucking year and stick with your script.
It would be a long time before I ever played another arena shooter again. 2004 is the year that arena shooters started to fall, and the success of games like Halo 2, Call of Duty, and many others were only partially to blame. For a time, the only way to access the internet and partake in online gaming was on PC. Xbox Live made it far easier and accessible without the need for an elaborate setup.
Very
a
true.
fourth grader in the 1990s is not going to be able to figure out how to set up a PC to play Doom online, but a fourth grade kid in 2004 has a much better chance of figuring out Xbox Live. Does that make sense? Arena shooters had been
Yeah,
going
I don't
somewhat
like it, but it
stagnant.
does.
It had been 11 years since Doom released, and aside from many visual upgrades, there hadn't been much that changed. Unable to settle on a direction for a sequel to Duke Nukem 3D, The Return of the King would come much too late to revive the genre, as Duke Nukem Forever would be trapped in development hell for over a decade. After its release, arena shooters might have been more dead than they were prior. Unreal Tournament had presence on Xbox Live, but wouldn't see similar levels of success on the 360, and it paled in comparison to the might of Halo 2 and Battlefront. Doom, not content with becoming irrelevant and being unable to live up to a legacy of changing video games forever, instead opted to change directions completely. With Doom 3, id Software decided to pursue a more story-driven action horror kind of game, drifting from its roots, but still receiving critical acclaim.
No. I call bullshit on this. I don't think anybody who's played Doom 3 would call it a story-driven game. It's a horror game, for sure. The first Doom was a horror game that had action elements, and I would happily say that Doom 3 is a horror game that has action elements, and I would proudly call both of them boomer shooters. The pace was just shifted. You still had, like, all kinds of weapons that you could carry around with you like a maniac, but they didn't switch things up as a way of trying to stay relevant. There was this whole thing internally in id Software. They wanted to remake Doom, and John Carmack wanted to make it more of a horror game, because that's what he kind of envisioned the first Doom to be, and now he didn't have, like, Romero or anyone holding him back from, going on and completing his whims. Doom 3 wasn't really a response to any of the shifting changes. That was what they wanted to do. They weren't trying to reinvent the wheel. I mean, Carmack's engine, the id Tech 4 engine, holy shit. Yeah, he was trying to reinvent quite a few things with id Tech 4, this game engine. But, like, Doom as a game was not trying to be a story-driven, narrative, slow-paced shooter. Like, it's a boomer shooter. Let's get our shit accurately here.
A legacy of changing video games forever, instead opted to change directions completely. With Doom 3, id Software decided to pursue a more story-driven action horror kind of game, drifting from its roots, but still receiving critical acclaim. Well, how the turntables.
Oh, I hate that line. It's so smug. God damn it. It's so smug. It's like, oh, well, Doom, let's see. How relevant are you today? Oh, please don't, sir. Can you not? Yes, Zazzy, I have read Masters of Doom, and it's a great book. Great book. Getty. Red Babe is the greatest arena shooter of all time. And one day I'll play it for the channel, and just for you. Doom 3, I think, was divisive on release, but I love seeing all the love for it these days. Wub, Emily, Andrew, like, I love seeing all the love for Doom 3. I've never played it all the way through. I remember playing the demo back in the day, but my computer wasn't powerful enough to really run it, so I never bought the full game. I did end up upgrading my computer so that I could get Quake 4, which came out the following year. But, like, it's grand for me to see the love for Doom 3, because there's room for every iteration of every first-person shooter in this house. That's what Dad says. There's room for all of it. But, like, what I can't be a part of is, like, derision toward a certain genre or bias towards one series of games being better than any. We're all going to have our preferences, and we're allowed to have our preferences. In fact, man is a huge Halo stan, and he thinks it's the greatest first-person shooter series in the world. God bless, that's his right. That's him as a gamer. But I don't particularly care for this kind of smugness in the line that he just delivered there, or the inaccuracies, the historical perspective. Doom did not stray from its roots. The Doom did not stray from anything. It was a Doom game through and through. So, like, I don't understand, outside of any kind of smug derision, what his point is here.
But still receiving critical acclaim. Well, how the turntables. Instead of Half-Life copying Doom, now it's the other way around.
Which it isn't.
Not to mention Counter-Strike had seen a major update with CS Source, and Call of Duty was starting its run of success as World War II shooters were becoming more mainstream. Add on to this the rise of Battlefield, Battlefront, and other massive FPS titles, and the once mighty pie that arena shooters alone used to feast on was being consumed by many others. Timesplitters, Future Perfect, Unreal Tournament, these may have been the last bastions for the genre on console. But after this, FPS titles had grown so far from their original iteration, and they weren't looking back.
And that's not entirely inaccurate. They had evolved. They had evolved quite a bit. But we're looking at the mass market appeal. And we did enter kind of a dark time during this period. You know, if we're talking like, I would say 2007 is the year where everything changed to a degree, where boomer shooters were no longer relevant in that current time and day. Like, I would say, if 2007 you see the release of Stalker, Halo 3, Portal, Team Fortress 2, Crysis, BioShock. You know, that's the year, I think, where everything kind of changed. And I'm not saying that there weren't other boomer shooters at the time that were necessarily irrelevant, but overshadowed, perhaps. Absolutely overshadowed, because we had games like in 2009 we had Raven's Wolfenstein, we saw the launch of Borderlands, we had Left 4 Dead 2. You know, you move forward to 2011 is a rough year, because that's when you get Duke Nukem Forever and Rage from id Software. Like, the style, the more fast-paced, action-driven style of boomer shooters was absolutely overshadowed by the rise of the console shooter and the limitations that consoles had. Twin stick shooters, you know, you couldn't carry around like hundreds of weapons because you had to be able to switch through them quickly. That's why the weapon limit was there. The regeneration was there to save on resources. So, like, there were games in the genre that were still trucking along. It's just that they were overshadowed in the mass market. It wasn't that they were no longer relevant or that they were just, like, not good anymore. It's just that the trends shifted. And if you only look at the trends, if you only look at what was popular from the mass media market scale, then that's like saying, well, it looks like action movies aren't relevant anymore because the MCU is out there to prove us all wrong and how to do action right. Which it isn't. No, I will not stop reminding you of Rage.
Their original iteration, and they weren't looking back. The release of COD 4 and Halo 3 pretty much sealed the fate of arena shooters and denied their future relevance in gaming. If you weren't willing to adapt, you weren't going to succeed. They had
yes, from a mass market perspective, but there were so many... Sorry about that. I keep muting the mic every time I try to cough, so I missed that one. There was an audience for it. There were people who loved those games. I loved those games. I stopped playing first-person shooters around that time because they weren't being made for me anymore. And that was fine. I lamented the fact that I didn't have first-person shooters that I wanted to play that were new and coming out in the world. But I was fine with not playing the ones that were coming out because they weren't being made for me. It isn't that these other... Hold on, how did he say it?
The release of COD 4 and Halo 3 pretty much sealed the fate of arena shooters and denied their future relevance in gaming. If you weren't willing to adapt, you weren't going to succeed. They had slower movement, regenerating health, a 2-weapon inventory. These things were antithetical to the core of arena shooters. And as developers and players started to favor the trends set by Halo 3 and COD 4, The trends set by Quake, Unreal, and Doom were quickly being forgotten. Modern military and World War II shooters had firmly taken over. After this generation of consoles, new arena shooters were few and far between, and those that did release, well, I can't really think of any on the Xbox 360.
We're talking here. I see the real shift, and like obviously his bias has been kind of showing since he started talking about Halo, but now he's talking about the console market. He's strictly focusing on the console market and your success on the console market. Everything was being pushed for consoles at the time because of the new generation, the 7th generation of consoles, PlayStation 3, Xbox 360. So only really using success on a console as a metric of singular success is both fair and unfair, because that was what they were pushing for at the time. Real quick, Slipgate Studios, how you doing, buddy? Melancholy Geek, it's good to see you here. Glad to have you in at any point. I've been wow, almost 2 hours now. Holy shit. But to only really look at the success on a console and whether or not these games were appearing on console is both fair and unfair, because consoles had that was I feel like the apex of console marketing. Like, consoles are still huge these days, and that's fine. I feel like the PC market is kind of back up to sort of even with the console market in terms of what we're marketing towards, in terms of what we're looking at as far as like getting gamers in on. Because the PC market is so much more versatile than consoles are. There are a lot more limitations with consoles versus the PC market. So it's just really unfair that here in this point of the history that the Actman is presenting, he's talking about how, like, he calls them arena shooters, but boomer shooters were declining in relevance simply because they're not showing up on consoles anymore, and they're not being as successful on consoles, when now all the developers are being told by publishers to push for console first, and then maybe PC afterwards. So it's just like, I don't know. It's a fair but also unfair point at the same time.
That did release, well, I can't really think of any on the Xbox 360. I guess that's the point, huh? FPS titles were now more about personal accomplishment, easily shared user-generated content, progression systems, social features, all things that most arena shooters failed to adapt to. And cooperative shooters like Left 4 Dead, Destiny, and Borderlands started cropping up, and now FPS had such a mainstream appeal. Call of Duty and Halo were much more new user-friendly. It changed the demographic substantially, as filthy casuals like myself now found ourselves screeching into the void on Xbox Live. And if me as a 7th grader could play Halo 3 on my console, why would I hop to PC to play an arena shooter? FPS titles were a lot more social and team-oriented now. Halo had vehicles, Call of Duty had trash talk in lobbies, it had zombies. Battlefield had squads, Counter-Strike had teamwork and coordination. And arena shooters were still just zipping and zooming around without a care in the world. You guys want to go fast again? Are we still popular? I hope so. Some of you Call of Duty.
Oof. Oh, God, the derision. The derision is just so, like, evident here. It's so hard because, like, I feel like I can only make the same point so many times. Like, we're at this point in the video, he's really speaking for himself now. He's really putting all of his cards on the table and talking just how much he feels that the console games are way more interesting than the PC gaming market. There's something there for everyone, but they weren't selling on consoles. Boomer shooters weren't selling on consoles. So by that metric, I guess that means that the console shooters were just more interesting and better then? Is that what he's trying to say? Because it really does feel like at this point he's just mocking boomer shooters.
You guys want to go fast again? Are we still popular? I hope so. Some of you Call of Duty veterans may remember a playlist in COD 4 called Old School. Most of you will have no idea what I'm talking about because less than 2 years after release, the playlist was one of the least populated and consistently sat under 1,000 players. Old School mode was the arena shooter version of COD 4. But while Infinity Ward tried to pay homage, it was clear they were paying homage to a relic of the past. And this mode was abandoned in all future releases outside of COD 4 Remastered. So this begs the question, why didn't arena shooters stay relevant? It's not like just because there were other offerings that it made arena shooters objectively worse, right?
No, that's not what happened, but please continue.
So what happened? Horrible new player experience. Almost no one wants to fight FPS players with thousands of hours while they haven't played 5 hours yet. You can barely strafe without losing track of enemies while you get people rocket jumping and murdering you before you can even react.
If you can point and shoot, you can play Insurgency. If you've played Rising Storm for an hour, you can kill someone who's played for 1,000. Arena shooters, however, not only is there more complexity in moment-to-moment gameplay, but there's also a lot more punishment for failure. In Rising Storm, one death is a drop in the bucket, and loadouts keep your character consistently powerful. But in Quake, that death not only grants the enemy a point, it also means they're given the upper hand next time. You become a mouse who must slay the cat.
So what you're saying is that you don't want to get good? Sorry, that was such a no. I do not subscribe to the get good mindset, not in the slightest. But like what I'm hearing is like you're right. This is a fair point in that jumping into an arena shooter, an actual arena shooter, an online multiplayer only first-person deathmatch shooter can be very intimidating, and it is very intimidating because then when you take into account the player base that's been doing this for 1,000 hours and you just kind of walk in and you're like, I want to have a good time, you're getting fucking like turned to jelly left and right at the very beginning, and it can be a steep learning curve. But again, if you're only talking about multiplayer, yeah, you're going to jump into COD, you're going to jump into Halo, you're going to jump into whatever, and you're going to get fucking murdered the same way. This is a terrible argument to make. If you're jumping into the multiplayer aspect of any first-person shooter, then what you're going to be doing is, if you're new to that game, to that weapon set, to that skill set, and you're jumping into that multiplayer, and there are people who've been doing it for hundreds of hours before you, if like Halo Infinite has been out for a year and a half now, multiplayer-wise, if I went to go jump into that multiplayer now and face off against the people who have been playing it for hundreds and hundreds of hours since it came out, I would get my shit pushed in because I don't know anything about that world, that level. I can go play Quake Remastered multiplayer and hold my own because I've been playing Quake for 26, 27 years. It's like if you are a new player to any online multiplayer component, you're gonna get fucking wrecked until you get good at it. And it's a steep learning curve, and not everybody is going to be into that. And so if you're not into that, that's fine. Don't be into that. I don't like to play a lot of multiplayer shooters because half the time I'm gonna get fucked, and I know that. And I enjoy the single player component more than I do the multiplayer component. And I enjoy the multiplayer component when I'm doing with people that I know. Like, when it's with people that I know, and then I can celebrate their kills just as much as I celebrate my kills, then that's when it's fun. But if you're just fighting against these, like, professional esports guys who are, like, you know, trying to get their Twitch numbers up, yeah, that's not really fun. That's not enjoyable. Like, Fortnite is not an enjoyable game for me, and that's something I'm going to talk about in the video that comes out on Saturday. Fortnite is not enjoyable to me because, like, I'm just getting fucked. I'm getting wrecked left and right. It is incredibly intimidating to get into, and so I don't see a lot of point for me to play a game and invest in a game where I'm just gonna, like, get destroyed often by other people who know what they're doing, and I don't have time to learn the systems and the mechanics of the game. It's not about learning the systems and the mechanics of the game. It's about learning how to navigate other real people in real time who have already set their skill set in place. You're not fighting against the game or the artificial intelligence. You're fighting against other people in real time, and that's going to work for some people, and it's not going to work for other people. And I think the argument of saying that it's a steep learning curve to get into an arena shooter, an online multiplayer only arena shooter, is a really that's a harsh statement to make, because if you are a person who plays arena shooters, you've either been playing it for a while, or you know that that's going to be a thing when you get into it, and you're going to be okay with that. I do not believe for a second that it's easier to jump into Insurgency, Call of Duty, Halo multiplayer modes than it is to jump into Quake Champions, because you are going in against real people playing this game. You're playing against other real people whose skills are either more honed or less honed than yours. So you're going to go in knowing that you're going to get wrecked, and you're going to be okay with that. It's just whether or not you enjoy like the systems of the game itself, whether you enjoy COD systems, Halo systems, or Quake Champion systems. That's what I have to say about that.
In Rising Storm, one death is a drop in the bucket, and loadouts keep your character consistently powerful. But in Quake, that death not only grants the enemy a point, it also means they're given the upper hand next time. You become a mouse who must slay the cat. Lower player counts in these games result in frequent occasions of less experienced players being pummeled with no room to grow, which itself creates a self-fulfilling prophecy.
If you think about even the most hardcore fighting games, a casual can pick up a controller, mash buttons, and sometimes win.
Sometimes win, yeah. You can also sometimes win in an arena shooter. You can also sometimes win in the COD or the Halo. You can, or maybe not even like sometimes win. I think that's also a fallacy to make that statement, because like in a fighter like Street Fighter, you have a limited number of rounds, whereas in an online shooter system, you have multiple people all playing, racking up kill counts and scores. So like it is more difficult to win, but you can also pick up and play, and you could win, as opposed to, you know, this arena right here. Melancholy, I will have to go and watch that ReACTing vid, because I'm interested to see what the context surrounding that is.
The skill gap in arena shooters is just too polarizing for casual players to enjoy without becoming a hardcore player themselves. There's also far too many different subgenres of shooter to compete with nowadays that what worked in the 90s is looked at as antiquated. There's a stigma around it. Gamers want something more than bunny hopping around a static landscape for 10 minutes. They want to progress. They want a ranking system.
Do they want a ranking system? Wait, what? Say that again.
There's a stigma around it. Gamers want something more than bunny hopping around a static landscape for 10 minutes. They want to progress. They want a ranking system, things to unlock, a class to build, armor to customize. Ella,
Really? Do they? Do we really? Is that what we want, gamers? I'm not 100% sure on that one. Is that what we really want? Do we want progression and ranking and skills and loot boxes? Do we really want all of that? I don't. Yeah. Pura, he should have said casual audience. Oh my God. Ugh, Jesus Christ.
Hopping around a static landscape for 10 minutes. They want to progress. They want a ranking system, things to unlock, a class to build, armor to customize. Hell, it wasn't even just the rise of other shooter genres. The rise of online gaming as a whole served to thwart the arena shooter monopoly. But at the same time, you might be thinking, well, Actman, companies like id Software and Valve were still doing really well. Why couldn't they revive arena shooters? Well, id Software and Valve sat in similar positions after the success of Doom 3 and Half-Life 2. They had too much dignity to milk their franchises and create anything less than a stellar, revolutionary new entry. And so both franchises went dormant for years. Epic Games was developing a new arena shooter back in 2014, but completely switched focus to work on this upcoming third-person shooter. How long would Epic Games have been in business if they hadn't abandoned Unreal Tournament for Fortnite?
What a statement. What a fucking statement. How long would Epic Games have stayed in business if they hadn't abandoned Unreal Tournament in favor of Fortnite? I think, sir, you forget the relevancy of the Unreal Engine. You forget that. I think they would be in business. I think they would be just fine monetarily because of the Unreal fucking Engine. My God, that is a statement. Like, Fortnite is a cash cow. I'm not gonna deny that. I'm not gonna look at someone and say, why the fuck do you love Fortnite? You scrub, how dare you traitor. No, go enjoy Fortnite. I have my thoughts on Fortnite, and again, as I said, I have a video coming out on Saturday where I'm gonna talk about Fortnite. But to imply that Epic fucking Games could not have maintained as much success by focusing on Unreal Tournament as opposed to Fortnite, that is a statement and a half. Fortnite was an unexpected, stratospheric success. It was unexpected. It was unexpected. They landed on lightning in a bottle, and now they capitalize on it, and that's fine. They're getting their bag. But how dare you? How fucking dare you make that statement? That is just, mind-blowing to me.
Been in business if they hadn't abandoned Unreal Tournament for Fortnite. Duke Nukem Forever, like I said, had no fucking direction whatsoever. That was just a pure disaster. And Quake 3 was a big hit, but it took like 9 years for a sequel to come out. And by that point, Halo 2 and Xbox Live were blasting off into space.
So, let's see. Quake Live came out in 2010, though. So that was an extension of Quake 3's lifespan. And Quake Live was originally playable in an internet browser. You could play multiplayer Quake in your Internet Explorer window. And Quake Live has lasted for literally... Quake Live has lasted for years. Quake Champions was originally set up as an expansion pack for Quake Live. So Quake Champions took longer to develop because they decided to switch what they were doing midstream. Same thing with Doom 2016. It's not like they weren't working on anything.
Come out, and by that point, Halo 2 and Xbox Live were blasting off into space. The next Half-Life game would be a VR title released 500 million
Wait
years
for this.
after Half-Life 2. But
can we just get... No, I didn't mean to volume. Hold on, let's...
Xbox Live were blasting off into space. The next Half-Life game would be a VR title released 500 million years after Half-Life 2.
The next Half-Life game would be a VR game released 500 million years after Half-Life 2. We're ignoring Half-Life 2 episodes 1 and 2 completely with that statement. Is it because they didn't have multiplayer components? I mean, Alex didn't. Alex didn't have a multiplayer component. Again, it's a statement like that which just tells me that there was so little research put into this. Half-Life episodes 1 and 2 were high water marks for the genre. So to just jump from Half-Life 2 to Alex, brother, you are ignoring things. He's even ignoring Rage. He's ignoring the release of Rage. It's not like id Software. id Software never milks their fucking franchises. I mean, yeah, we got Doom 2016 and then Doom Eternal, but, they wanted to get away from Doom for a while, so they made Quake, and then they got away from Doom again, and then made Rage, and it's that's just what they do.
But what about Doom 2016? That had an arena shooter multiplayer, and you're right. It was okay, but it also really sucked ass. Playing as demons in multiplayer and killing other players, that's what was cool about Doom 2016's multiplayer, and almost everything else kind of sucked ass. Especially all these unforgivable dances. The multiplayer of Doom 2016 felt like it was checking a box, as 98% of the effort went towards the single player. So all the franchises and studios that had pioneered arena shooters were either fucking up or doing something completely different.
No! They were not fucking up with Doom 2016. My god, man, have you played the game? They made this single-player component. They made... Doom 2016 is a single-player game with multiplayer tacked on. They didn't fuck up with that. You're just looking at the multiplayer. That's it. And Doom was a single-player game with a multiplayer component added on. They originated Deathmatch. They didn't come out here to reinvent Deathmatch. They came out here to reinvent the single-player And they did, and you're ignoring that because you're talking about your online console feelies at this point.
Bethesda and id Software did revive Doom, but as an experience of being an ultra badass blasting demons. And with its sequel Eternal, they ditched the entire concept of arena multiplayer entirely in favor of making this one mode that I played 3 times and never touched again.
Which is true, because
it
it
couldn't
sucked.
revitalize the arena shooter genre, who could? Nobody. Certainly not.
Brother, you're an... Nope. Nope. I said I wasn't gonna get too fucking salty, but I almost just did, and I'm trying really hard not to because, like, look, the boomer shooter, he's talking like arena shooters, like online multiplayer shooters, but that wasn't an arena shooter. That was it was the modern, fuck me.
Favor of making this one mode that I played 3 times and never touched again. So if Doom couldn't revitalize the arena shooter genre, who could? Nobody. Certainly not fucking lawbreakers. If you check the player count of the arena shooter genre on Steam, it's barely a fraction of...
Let's look at this here. Ultra Kill, Quake Champions, Quake Live, Madness.
What CSGO pulls in. And player count alone doesn't matter. You can still play these games and they are still very much alive. But they're not nearly as important or relevant. Splitgate might be the best.
Not as important or relevant to what metric? To online multiplayer? We're not making them like that anymore, my guy. You're not here in the community. You're not playing those games. Those games are not for you. That's not what you're playing. And so you're saying they're not important or relevant? So you're saying Dusk, a Medieval, Ultra Kill, Hrot, Viscera Fest, Vomitorium, Head On. You're saying all of these are irrelevant and not important. Because you can't play them on your Xbox 360 multiplayer arena. Because they're not arena shooters. They're retro shooters. They're not being made for you. So you're saying that they're not relevant. Like, I don't understand why you want to create this revisionist history and then utterly dismiss the accomplishments that first-person shooters have made in the indie market or even in the AAA market with Wolfenstein, New Order, Wolfenstein, New Colossus, fucking Doom 2016, Doom Eternal. It's always been about the single player experience, and the multiplayer experience was an added on component, but for those who only want to play multiplayer, that's what you're looking at right now, and that's what you're being dismissive of.
But they're not nearly as important or relevant. Splitgate might be the best example of a comeback, but that comeback was short-lived and its player base has evaporated since. Though the studio is working on a sequel, the reason Splitgate even saw this level of success as a pure arena shooter was due to its incredible portal gimmick, and movement and aiming was much more accessible to newcomers. This was adapting to trends. It seems the best way of bringing back arena shooters was through fun, easy to understand movement tech like grappling hooks. And what do you know? This feature has been universally praised and beloved in Doom Eternal, Halo Infinite, and Titanfall 2. Arena shooters simply didn't adapt in a way that could attract a new audience, so they were left with their dwindling old boomers. They were too stubborn, adhering to the things that...
Wait a minute.
Fall 2. Arena shooters simply didn't adapt in a way that could attract a new audience, so they were left with their dwindling old boomers.
Why is he using fucking... is that a Gears of War model? Is that Gears of War? Jesus Christ.
They were too stubborn, adhering to the things that made them popular, like rocket jumping, and newcomers didn't feel compelled to master all the nuances of these games and their movement just to get 2 kills. This is why we saw trends of offering rewards to bad players, with things like death streaks in Modern Warfare 2, ordnance drops in Halo 4, Titans in Titanfall. Everybody gets a Titan, no matter how poorly you do. Developers realized that the casual audience shouldn't be neglected. They introduced a lot of elements of randomness. Anyone can grab the Thanos glove in Fortnite and become a badass. Anyone can hit the Smash Ball in Smash Bros. And unleash a devastating attack. Not to mention, if people were going to master a video game, they'd rather master aspects like positioning, aim, strategy,
Would they?
What weapons
Really?
I
Would
go
they?
for.
Is that what they
These
would want to
aspects
master?
you see in games like Rainbow Six and Counter-Strike. The reason Call of Duty has never given up.
Why do we keep comparing Rainbow Six and Counter-Strike? Why do we keep putting those up next to each other? Just because they feature some like tactical real world weapons. Like neither of them play similarly in any way, shape, or form. Like
positioning, aim, strategy, what weapons I go for. These aspects you see in games like Rainbow Six and Counter-Strike. The reason Call of Duty has never given up its extremely short time to kill is because that's what attracts the casual audience. This is one of the fundamental differences between modern shooters that are successful and why arena shooters have fallen out of favor.
how is Counter-Strike a modern shooter? How is that a modern shooter? Am I missing something about Counter-Strike? Because since I don't play it, like that doesn't feel like a modern shooter.
Strategy, what weapons I go for. These aspects you see in games like Rainbow Six and Counter-Strike. The reason Call of Duty has never given up its extremely short time to kill is because that's what attracts the casual audience. This is one of the fundamental differences between modern shooters that are successful and why arena shooters have fallen out of favor. So what happened to arena shooters? Gatekeeping happened. Quakers want you to follow jank written guides on how to perform basic movement because things like bunny hopping and rocket jumping aren't explained in the games, and never had intuitive control systems implemented that made those actions easier. Shooting at a blur darting across a CRT monitor with a ball mouse while compensating for 200 millisecond lag isn't very engaging for hours either. And by the time technology caught up with the genre, tastes in multiplayer had long changed. In short, the movement of games like Quake are what made arena shooters great, but it's also what made it impossible to grow because it was inaccessible to newcomers.
Wow, interesting. I feel very similarly about Call of Duty and Halo. Like, I don't feel like those are very accessible to newcomers. Like, but even still, like, if it's something you're interested in, you're going to be interested in it and you're going to want to play it and you're going to want to play it as well as you can. So I think we're just determining success by how accessible it is to a casual audience. So if it's something that not every single person can play or feel like they can play, then it's not relevant.
By the time the Xbox One and PS4 generations launched, arena shooters had all but fallen out of memory, and any new attempts at reviving the genre hardly made a splash. The games felt outdated, primitive. Even when you look at Doom 2016, it looks like it's from the early 2000s. And each new release that failed to garner a significant audience only made it harder for the next one to try. And at a certain point, they just stopped trying. I hope you have enjoyed this trip back into history, examining the intricacies of the FPS genre and arena shooters. And I am kind of sad that they've fallen out of favor. There have been some indie games that perform moderately well, and a lot of these arena shooters are still playable with very small but dedicated player bases. Like, you could still play the original Half-Life's multiplayer if you really want to. It's actually quite fun. But it's clear that interest in this genre has never been lower, and even Quake Champions seems unable to break into the mainstream. Still, we owe a lot to these ancient classics, but their reign as king has ended. So I hope you've come to understand how and why this genre died out. It wasn't instant, but slow. It's a case of stubborn pride and a change in trends. Still, when I listen to the metal as fuck soundtrack of Quake 2, I feel this urge to go fast and jump around. I feel like maybe there's hope, but to be honest, I'm not sure if there's an arena shooter that could interest me at this point. Whatever chance there might have been for arena shooters to make a comeback and return, it most likely died with Doom Eternal. But if anyone can bring back the intense, fast-paced action of arena shooters and revive the genre, it's gonna be Doom. And that has been the rise and fall of arena shooters. So thank you all for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video. Leave a like if you did and subscribe to the Act Man.
No, I don't think I will, sir. So there we go. There's the video, kids. And, I feel a little dirty right now. Because we have only focused on the multiplayer aspects of these games as their only fucking sense of worth. We didn't look at the single player aspects at all. Like, we just fucking did multiplayer only, and multiplayer only doesn't make, or like, a multiplayer component does not make a shooter an arena shooter. So like, we've got a double-edged sword here, okay, in that he's calling these older retro boomer shooters, however you want to label them, he's calling them all arena shooters. He's calling their deathmatch modes arena shooting. Like, that's not accurate, okay? And then he goes so far as to say, oh yeah, I hope you've enjoyed this historical perspective. No, this is not a historical perspective. This is all fucking bias right here, my guy. Like, you're telling me that Doom 2016 and Doom Eternal aren't lending to the relevance of boomer and retro shooters right now? You're completely ignoring Wolfenstein New Order, Wolfenstein New Colossus. You're ignoring the indie scene. You're ignoring the fucking relevance of Realms Deep, QuakeCon. You're ignoring all of that for your precious multiplayer. For what Halo does as a multiplayer game, for what Call of Duty does as a multiplayer game. I did not want to sit here and make this video and do this live stream so when this video was announced and I saw it, I thought, okay, this is going to be bad. When I went through the video, I saw how bad it was, and I thought about it for half a minute, and I said, I am going to do this live stream. I am going to talk about this point by point, because it is important from a historical perspective, from a game preservation perspective, and from an accuracy perspective. When we have YouTubers like the Actman who have the reach that they do, the platform that they do, it's so much more important for them to get their accuracy correct and to leave the bias at the door. I may not be the biggest fan of Xbox, Microsoft, or whatever, and I may not be the biggest fan of like Call of Duty or these the new console shooters, but I cannot deny their popularity, their relevance. I can't deny the impact that they have had on the gaming scene. And if I was to do a history video on that and to like radically reshape the perspective based on how I felt about them, that would be terrible of me. Like, that would be so irresponsible even. Like, I decided to do this because, like, I don't want to hype myself up. I don't want to pat myself on the back, but I feel very strongly about being a historian of the first-person genre of these games that are coming out. Like, I have an entire series, right? I have an entire series that I have been working on. Here's the playlist. Boom. History of first-person shooters. I'm literally going through all of these, and I'm playing these games, and I'm tracking the rise and fall. And I will be playing Call of Duty. I will be playing Halo, because it's so important for people to understand where the games came from, where these systems came from, where they've been, where they're going, what we've seen, and even some hidden classics along the way. Like, it's just so important to present this correctly. And what Actman did here was he did not. And there is just, like, by the end of the video, there's so much bias. There is just so much bullshit that he's throwing around. He's not even getting the genre correctly. He's calling them all arena shooters when that's not what they were. I think we're primarily just kind of talking about the relevance of the multiplayer of each of these games, and that's fine. You want to talk about multiplayer modes? That's a completely different video. But you're talking about the rise and fall of arena shooters, like an entire genre of gaming. And that's where I take umbrage here. So, oof. Yeah, no, yeah, like, it's a shame. It's a shame. It's a shame. And I would love to see him do better. Looking at his output, though, like, he doesn't seem like the type of person who is looking to do accuracy or to do better. He's going for clicks. And if that's the case, then fine. We've got room for every YouTuber like that. But, like, it makes me feel sad to look at someone's output when they have such a huge base and platform, to have to think that he's talking on certain subjects and not presenting any sort of accuracy, and is just presenting bias and opinions, you know, but couched as like this is a historical perspective. Anybody can do a video essay and a video review, and that's fine. Go do that. Go tell me about how whether you think Dead Space is a masterpiece or whether or not this is the worst Halo campaign or whatever. That's clearly your opinion. Just don't give me a video saying that this is your guide through history and then fucking tell me that this is historically accurate, because it's just not. It's just absolutely not. So that's this live stream. Oh my god, thank you for putting up with me. There was so many people who were here throughout, and I'll get all the names wrong. Like, thank you everyone who's been commenting. I hope I've paid enough attention to the chat. I'm very grateful that you all were here during this viewing. I hope to see you on Saturday when I talk about Fortnite. Like I said, I've got a lot of thoughts on Fortnite. I meant to have this video ready for tomorrow, but I've been under the weather, as you can probably tell, and I've had a few technical hiccups, so it won't be out on Friday. It will be out on Saturday instead, bright and early Saturday morning. I have a few surprises involved. I got some people to do a bit of a roundtable, and we had a great discussion, and I'm very excited to present that. I don't want to say who. I definitely want to keep that as a bit of a surprise, because yeah, the discussions were very fun. So thank you. Yeah, Zazzy. Honestly, I thought you doing the video about Fortnite was a joke and that I was about to send. No, I got a Fortnite video coming out. I'm working on Descent right now. I am working on a Descent video, but I do have a Fortnite video coming out on Saturday. Like I said, I really wanted I wanted it to be out on Friday. I really did. I was aiming for Friday, but I have been put behind. I don't know if you can tell how fucking sick I am right now. I haven't had a cold like in years. Like I am heavily under the weather, and last week I got my wisdom teeth pulled out. So it's fucking, I did not get Randy Pitchford. God, if I could pull Randy Pitchford into a round table on anything, it would be about aliens, colonial marines. That's what it would be about. Okay, I'm going to end this. Thank you again, everyone. I hope that you have a great rest of your day moving into the weekend. I'll see you Saturday morning with my Fortnite video. Thank you for putting up with all this bullshit, and I am very happy to... Yeah, Duke Nukem Forever will be happening. Oh, yeah, no, Duke Nukem Forever Roundtable, yes. Absolutely. Oh, all right. Time to stop this stream. Thank you all so much. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Enjoy your weekend, and I'll talk to y'all soon. Stay hydrated out there. We'll see ya.